Okay, as Emma said, please do contact people through the Moodle platform. I've also included my Twitter handle on the front screen and the back screen there. So please do contact me kind of in the open directly as well. So what I'm going to say today on this, your first webinar of your talk, is something about the organization that's brought some of this training together. And that is GODAN. GODAN stands for Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition. And although there's a group of people, myself included, that are involved in the management of this program, first and foremost, GODAN is actually, it's you as partners of this network. It has a small secretariat that is managed at the organization that I work at, which is CABI, and then a capacity development and research unit, which is managed by Altera and involves Wageningen and FAO, etc., that is called GODAN Action. So GODAN might, in many ways, be, depending on your audience, seen as three different things. The network is the most important thing, the thing that really matters. And then there's this small secretariat unit and a group that specifically works on capacity building and research. I'll just turn off some of my notifications in the background so you won't hear them. So if I can progress my slides. So I don't seem to have the ability to progress my slide. Could somebody give me that?
Yes, you see. Okay.
I had a panel a short while ago that showed me the different slides, and it appears to have gone now, but I have it now. Thank you. Okay, so what does GODAN believe in? What do we as a network believe in? Well, we believe that it's important to advocate that important data sets, the key data sets in agriculture and nutrition, should be considered as global public goods and made available to everyone. That doesn't mean that all data is going to be made available, but really the key important core data sets which provide this data infrastructure should be made available to everyone. So then what do we mean by open data? And this is a tricky one because there's a number of different definitions out there, and I understand that some of your modules cover this. At a very basic level, we think that open data is data that anybody can access, use, and share. It should be accessible, so it should be put out there, published on the web. It should be available, ideally, in a range of formats up to a machine-readable format, and then licensed in an appropriate way so that people can access, use, and share it. So open data can be taken by anybody and can be transformed into lots of different new data-driven projects, products, and services. Some have said, and I think this is the open knowledge definition, that open data helps create a world where knowledge creates power for the many, not for the few. Others have said, and I think rather misleadingly, that data is the new oil. So let's put a stamp on that now. Let's not see that it isn't. We don't burn it. We don't burn it so that we can't use it again, so it's gone. We instead build with it. We build infrastructure with it, and hopefully we can use it time and time again. So much better to think of data as infrastructure in the same way that we would think of a bridge or a road. So, you know, when we've gone to the effort of securing it, of managing it, making sure it's good quality and putting it out there and making it available for people to use, let's use it time and time again for lots of different journeys. So open data is already all around us in many countries, and it's used all the time. It powers a lot of weather apps. It powers a lot of transit apps in cities like London. And in cities like London, they use Transport for London data to create lots of different products and services to help move you around the city. Open data is already transforming in many countries the way that we live, and I think it can do so also in agriculture and food. But we're at the beginning of this stage in many parts of the world. In many ways, it's like we were with the internet in general in the mid-1990s. Before this time, Even the biggest companies didn't have websites. But fast forward to now, and you have the internet as a standard. You couldn't really function without it. So, just to look at some more of these other frameworks. For the more technically minded, this is a framework that might be useful to you. This is the Tim Berners-Lee 5-star of open data. At the lowest level here, data has been opened in the form of a PDF. So it's been put out on the web, you've given it a license that allows you to use it, but it's not structured in a way that makes it very accessible. So you can try and copy and paste pieces of a PDF, but anybody who's tried to do that knows that it's quite a tricky thing to do. So as you move up the openness level, you then move to spreadsheets, non-proprietary spreadsheets, and then more specialist data formats, RDF and linked open data, where you start to bring your data in the context of other people's data. And as you move through this cycle, you make this material not just human readable, but machine readable. Another framework that is rather useful, which is somewhat different from the strict open data principle, and doesn't necessarily necessitate that data should be made open at the point of use, are this thing called the FAIR principles, where basically we say that data should be findable, it should be accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And we tend to think of it rather in the way that a lot of data should be open and openly licensed, but all data should be fair, or moving in that direction, having a clear license, reliable metadata, persistent, good provenance, machine readable. So what does GODAN do? Well, we support these efforts and these principles to make data available, accessible, and usable for unrestricted use worldwide. And we also support these FAIR principles to make sure that all data is structured in a way that makes it available for reuse. And then it's only really the license that you have to resolve to move it into open. We're a voluntary association of lots of different organizations, both public and private, who all agree to a basic set of principles. And there is a thing called our joint statement of purpose, which you can see on our website, so that when partners join up, they're joining up to a core set of principles. Our network of now over 600 partners incorporates a variety of perspectives, and I think you can see on your screen now a number of logos there, and you should recognize some organizations that you've worked with. There are countries there, there are blue chip companies, there are SMEs, there are NGOs, there are IGOs. We also pride ourselves on having a good geographical spread of our partner base. And although originally we started off with quite a Eurocentric and North American focus, the largest area, single area that has partners now is Africa, with 193 of our 600 partners. For the sake of transparency, and if you're involved with these initiatives, we like to be as transparent as possible. We are supported by a number of donors, and I think I've got 8 current donors there on the screen. US Department of Agriculture, German government, CTA, FAO, UK Department for International Development, the government of the Netherlands, GFAR, and CABI, who collectively support this initiative, either financially or with an in-kind contribution. Germany is a new addition to our steering committee this year and have a specific focus on addressing data rights. And China, through the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences, have also made a contribution and will be joining our steering committee in 2018. And just to differentiate us from GODAN Action is a specific action focused on research and capacity building, is specifically focused and managed and supported through the UK Department for International Development. So just to say a little bit about GODAN Action, I work for the Secretariat, but some of the other people that you'll have heard just earlier, Emma and Ilke, are specifically focused on GODAN Action. They're, as I say, working specifically on research and capacity development, where we're working, as I say, largely on advocacy, kind of telling the story and encouraging people to do open data. And GODAN Action is a, sorry, I lost my slide there. GODAN Action is a collaborative action of these agencies. So again, like the Secretariat is guided by a steering committee of multiple agencies, so indeed is GODAN Action. It has a very clear mission, and this is what it believes, is that it believes that stakeholders benefit from improved and more effective use of open data by engaging with it in a practical and knowledgeable manner. And I think the important bit there is engaging with it in a practical and knowledgeable manner. It means getting your hands on. It means learning by doing. It means not in many ways starting with the data, but actually starting with the problem. It means focusing on real world problems and then looking at how data can help address those. So what can open data do for us? Well, it can do a variety of things, and one can look at this abstractly or quite concretely. If you were looking at it in abstract terms, and this is a kind of a typology that we developed through an early paper that we did with the Open Data Institute, we classify change that open data can catalyze in three broad ways. First of all is change within organizations or through organizations through improving the transparency, putting data out into the open, and data acting almost like an antiseptic, or you know, shining a bright light on something, making something much more obvious by making it open. But in many ways, in the agriculture sector, the areas that are more interested are the following two. That we foster innovation, so that we develop new products and services that wouldn't have been developed before, and to develop then much more efficient and effective decision making, improving efficiencies in process and providing decision support that wouldn't have been able to have been done before. So that's kind of thinking of it abstractly, but you know, in agriculture we like to be practical. In practice, it means we can drive development of new applications in some key thematic areas, some of which I list up here now: climate smart agriculture, improved fertilizer use, etc. And in fact, the potential applications are so wide that sometimes it's better to tell stories that illustrate what we can do with open data. And I was planning to illustrate that through a case study later, but actually what I might have to do, because some of you might have some bandwidth restrictions, is that I'll just flash it up on screen briefly and then talk you through some of what this application does, and you can go away and watch the video in your own time. So GODAN Action exists around kind of three key pillar areas. Facilitation of the use of standards, so improving the structure of data, making sure it's much more standardized and thereby interoperable, by researching impacts, so understanding what works. It's still early days in many ways for some of the open data actions, and we're only really now starting to understand the many different ways in which the data can have impacts when it becomes open. And then, of course, and you know, you can see this in action through this very webinar. Hopefully, we're building a capacity of a group of people to grapple these problems and help address them in their own ways. So if you look at the range of activities that GODAN Action are working on, this kind of unpacks that in a little bit more detail, and just highlighted the last one, the development of training courses to increase capacities of stakeholders to use and handle open data. So that's hopefully what we're doing here today, or starting on that road. So I've said that the open data community has come from a certain place. There was a very heavy emphasis on the data early on, but in many ways it's a lot easier to start with the problem, and that data might have a solution for. So everything in GODAN Action is really focused on solving real world problems. And to help with that, they've chosen to narrow down their focus on 3 important thematic areas of relevance to agriculture and nutrition sectors, and use them as a narrowing lens through which to look at broader issues of how open data can make a difference. And as a result, it's focusing on 3 thematic areas and has a principal focus this year on climate and weather data, and looking at how that can help drive business development and capacity development in that sector. So I understand that a lot of the materials that you will be working with will have a climate and weather data focus. So to return to the more of what I'm principally involved with, the return of the talking about the GODAN Secretariat. Let's not lose sight of what GODAN really is. It's a network of partners. It shouldn't be confused with this small secretariat or indeed the GODAN Action work. Really, it is about this network. It's about the 600 partners and what they bring together. And one of the roles within the Secretariat is to bring this very large group of quite diverse stakeholder organizations together. We convene them, we bring them together at events or through collaborative actions, we encourage them to work together, we match make people together. Or we convene working groups around particular thematic areas and encourage people to work together to solve problems with open data. And then we say we also equip them. So what do we equip them with? We give them stories of what works, hopefully, to help in their own advocacy, and we give them policy papers to help develop vision or give them guidance. And then ultimately we help promote action by empowering them, helping to get open data principles applied in policy or enshrined in legislation, to encourage them to promote new innovation mechanisms, or to devise or kick off new funding streams for research and capacity building. And we've been convening events of various size for a little while now, and you might be aware of some of the big events we've been involved in. Here is the Secretariat and some of the management team around the recent GODAN Summit in New York. And this was quite a large event, and here about 800 delegates from around, at that time, half the GODAN partners, so that was about 200 partners, gathered to give commitments and discuss matters that concern them. So it's quite large, 70 presenters, 10 panel discussions, all with different thematic areas, and a lot of profile raising for issues of joint concern. And there were various different audiences that it focused on. There was a practitioner element, but there was also a big element of high-level engagement. So we like to engage at high levels of organizations and at governments to make sure that we're making a difference by changing policy. And the only way you can do that is to get people like Willie Bett, who's the Minister of Agriculture in Kenya, and Sarah Hull, who's the head of corporate affairs in Syngenta, onto the platform to make commitments. So at this point, were we to have a bit more bandwidth, I would do a bit of storytelling, and we like to do storytelling. We publish case studies, we produce infographics and other communication materials, but one of the things we also do is produce videos. And it's, in many ways, although I'm telling you about this now, it's often better to show, don't tell. So this video I'll just quickly summarize for you, because I think because of bandwidth concerns we're not going to be able to show it. I will encourage you to go away and get your own insights from it. Is that it's about a fisherman in southern Africa who's struggling to secure a mortgage, to secure a loan to purchase a house. And the reason for that is that he doesn't have an audit trail of what he does, that he doesn't have a way to demonstrate that every day he goes out to fish, he catches some fish, he sells some fish, and he makes a profit from it. And what has been developed is an application called Abelobi, which sits on his phone, which allows him to decide when to go out to fish. So it will tell him basic information about where his colleagues have received information that there might be a patch of fish, or it has information about the height of waves, so weather information. And then it ties that information together with some simple applications which allow him to log in how much he's caught and how much he's sold his catch for, which exists then as an audit trail for the bank to examine, which allows him to secure loans both for his business and for kind of improvement of his personal life through being able to essentially secure a loan to buy a property, a house for him to live. So it's a nice, compelling story, and I will encourage you to go away and to have a look at this video later. The interesting thing about this story is that if you watch it in isolation and don't kind of go away and do a little bit of research yourself, or you don't have somebody to explain it to you, is that you don't necessarily see the open data in the story. So there are bits of this story, and that's why it's quite a good one, where it's very obvious that there are some bits that are not open data. You don't want to share your financial information with anybody, probably, but your bank. You might not want to share information about where the fish are, except with people that you trust. But some elements of the data are truly open. The weather data, the data that tells you what the wave height is going to be, the geospatial data that kind of underpins all of that, which tells you where the coastline is, etc., some of the mapping data. So in very many ways, it's a nice illustration that open data isn't always just open. It sits within a broader context, and the ODI, the Open Data Institute, uses a concept called the data spectrum, which I think you will be visiting soon, which very much you might want to look at when you look at this video again. Think about where the open data is in the story, think about where it's shared, think about where it's closed or least open. So hopefully when you've seen this, that you'll be compelled. It's a good story, it's quite attractive. You must think, well, everybody, understands open data. We've had our work done. Well, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are very challenging when it comes to open data. If you raise open data as a concept to them, they will often push back to you. So these are some of the things that they might say. They might say, well, it's only good for the big players. You're opening it up, but you're not opening it up for everybody, because you need to have the relevant bandwidth to make advantage of it. You need to have a computer in the right place or a smartphone. They might say that it could create more digital monopolies, more data monopolies and divides. It might say, well, okay, this data, it's only meaningful in a specific context. And if you're a researcher, this is a very, very common one. I'm not going to publish my data because I'm the only person who understands it. I can't possibly put it out there because you might misunderstand it. Neglecting, of course, the fact that if you're getting to the point where you're actually going to publish it in a journal, a scientific journal, then you should be pretty confident about your data and be able to explain it, because you're expecting that you're putting it out there as a form of truth. And then the final one is that, somebody has to pay. Well, that's absolutely true. open data doesn't mean free for everybody. It might be free at the point of use, but it still has to be paid for. So there does need to be a meaningful business case behind how you're going to publish and why you're going to publish. So because there are these complex challenges that we face, one of the jobs that the Secretariat has is to work with our partners to unpack some of these challenges and ask, why does open data matter? And specifically, why does open data matter for agriculture and nutrition in a development context? And how can it make an impact? So it's important that we address these challenges and that we work with partners to do so, to move the debate forward. We need to move the thinking on, and there's a real value in policy-focused research here, which we developed through a number of thematic working groups, that we need to give very well thought through policy-focused advice so that we can equip partners to continue to advocate on our behalf. And here are some example publications that we've produced. On the right-hand side, we've got there a range of success stories, and then some more kind of policy-focused publications focusing on particular areas, thematic areas of interest that respond to the specific challenges that we have. And for example, here's a recently published piece that we've done with 3 donor agencies: the UK Department for International Development, USAID, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this was specifically to look at a challenge around their open data policies. All 3 of these organizations all have open data policies at the moment, but they're concerned because sometimes the people in receipt of those policies and in receipt of funding that they give them kind of politely ignore them sometimes, and they want to kind of get to the bottom of how they can do it better. And one of the things that they've agreed to do is to collaborate. They've agreed to put their heads together to commission us to do a piece of research to understand whether, by having 3 separate policies, that's confusing for people who are in receipt of their grants, and to unpack the challenges that researchers have around publishing their data. Why aren't they doing it more readily? And what can they do in terms of changing their own policies to ensure that they do more of it? And as a result, we've already secured a little bit of a policy shift from them. So the Department for International Development have agreed to incorporate this research in the development of their new open access policy. And together they've produced a joint donor statement where they've already agreed to something else. And that is essentially at the first point to say, well, we need to talk more. We need to participate in a global funder dialogue, bring more funders in, and collectively resolve some of these issues together. And then they want to promote good practice amongst those people that they're giving funding to, and consistently engage with people so that they're not giving misleading or conflicting messages. Ultimately, they want to promote good practice. And at some point down the line, some of them at least, and Gates probably is foremost in this, is recognizing that that might come in a cost, as a cost to the donors. So the donors might have to pay researchers to do the right thing. Managing data has a cost associated with it. It has a cost at the point of publication, and it might have an ongoing cost to make sure that that data is kept up to date on an ongoing basis. And if the donors want people to do the right thing, then sometimes they're going to have to pay for that to a degree. They're also expecting that there will be efficiency savings off the back of that, and so it won't necessarily be meeting the full costs of it over time. As I said, one of the big important roles that we have is to convene people, to bring them together, and to have conversations in the open. But we recognize that to kind of take that conversation beyond the audiences that we engage with directly, whether that be policy or specialist practice audiences, and where we do that around large events, we need to raise profile in mainstream media. If you ever want to get to policymakers and encourage them to make a change, you can talk to them directly, or often one of the best ways is to make sure that when they open their morning newspaper in the morning, and sometimes with policymakers that's still a physical product, then it's best to get your message also in mainstream media. So around our summit last year, we engaged with around 200 media outlets, including some of the big players like the BBC, Reuters, Huffington Post, etc., and got that media message out there. We also used social media at the same time, and around that meeting, we were trending kind of globally around issues around open data worldwide, and on the East Coast of the US particularly, for the duration of large parts of that meeting. So we make a lot of noise, and if you look at the kind of the footprint of that, that means around that particular event, we got about 5 million reads in mainstream media and maybe 20 million on Twitter. And that acts as an important kind of background to which we can make specific engagement points to try and focus policymakers to make some change. If they've seen it in the news, in the mainstream news as well, then the chances are they might listen to us more meaningfully. So we're trying to encourage people to release more data sets, but we're focusing on where data sets meet a real need. So we're really focusing on the problems. We're encouraging governments and private sector to use open data to drive innovation. We're focusing on data rights so we don't build these new digital divides. We need to have a better understanding of what works, and that includes what works for business too. And this is a kind of an ongoing program. So more recently, I'm just going to mention a couple of initiatives that we've been involved with. Firstly, this summer we jointly hosted a meeting with the Kenyan government, which culminated in something we call the Nairobi Declaration, and the text of that is available in this slide. If you can't read that, I'm sure we can circulate a link on that. And the idea is that if we're going to make some meaningful change, then we need to engage with actually the ministries that are going to make a difference. So in this case, it's 15 African ministries currently, it might be growing soon, who have agreed that open data is an important driver to agricultural transformation in Africa. They, under the GODAN banner, are going to get together and determine what their own priorities are and move to release open data sets responsibly in their own context. And we'll be providing a kind of a light touch guidance around that. But there will also be organizations like AGRA and FAO who in many ways may be leading more thoroughly on that. And what does that essentially relate then to what I said was the last function of the Secretariat? I said we convene, we bring people together, we equip, we give them interesting pieces of policy-focused research and stories to help them tell their stories, and then we empower people. So what we're looking to do is to encourage people to act on their own behalf, whether that be through the ministries that I just mentioned earlier in Africa, or indeed its key partners that we're working with. And we've been recently, very, very recently, working with FAO to encourage them and empower them to open some of their own data, including the FAO stat data. So, and working through with them some of the challenges around them. The challenges around opening data are often not primary technical challenges. They're not about having the right platform. They're not about, having the right widgets to be able to open up a data set through an API, for example. But they're actually much more fundamental issues of resourcing, of institutional culture, of the relationships you have. It's about who owns the data or who is perceived to own the data. It's around the ethics about opening that data set up. What happens if I open this data set up and it all goes horribly wrong? So it's about these considerations are the much more important things in many ways than indeed the technical challenges. So what does this mean for you as a group? Well, hopefully we at the Secretariat and kind of the GODAN movement in more generally can make small steps to help make a kind of a more appropriate environment, a more amenable environment for you as open data advocates and open data learners to work in. So not everybody can have such a wide influence as some of the kind of influence that we've had in kind of governments and senior policymakers here, but everybody can have an influence in their own space, and everybody can help by telling stories about how open data can make a difference as they see them, as they witness them, as they're going along. One of the challenges that we have is having enough good case studies to tell that story. So in many ways, you know, I hope that you can be our future ambassadors. It's your network. You're the ambassadors. You're the ones who are going to make a difference in the long term. We're a small number of people. We seek to empower you as champions for open and fair data, and do the hard work. So that's me concluded. Please, that is my Twitter handle. Contact me directly through there, or indeed email messages through to the MOOC platform. Thank you.